We have Austin in Washington, who has something that's, I don't know, Austin, are you claiming that you have something more reliable than scientific methods?
Hi. Just two quick things. I just wanted to say that the hold music before the show started, whoever's curating that, fantastic job. Playing the solo from Hot for Teacher before the show started got me totally hyped.
That'd be Vern,
and
the Lord of Levels, I believe.
Yeah, the call screeners are doing a fantastic job. Always a pleasure to talk to them. So this all kind of originated out of a discussion I had with a missionary friend that works in South America, and basically the idea is the scientific method the best way to get to truth? And as part of that, how do we evaluate whether things are more true or less true? And I can kind of give further insight into that, but that's kind of what I'm trying to talk about.
I think I kind of understand what you're getting at. For me, something's either true or it's not. So when we talk about more or less true, what we're really saying is how we have an internal model or a proposed model, a claim about how reality works, and we're trying to figure out how accurate our model is with respect to the actual facts of the universe. And so, as far as I'm aware, the scientific methods, this examination of evidence using critical thinking, the best test methodologies, and submitting it to others for peer review, I have yet to see anyone demonstrate any more consistently reliable path to understanding reality. So if you have one, I'd be happy to know it.
So here's my problem. And I like to think that I'm a fairly scientifically minded person. And where this came to a head for me was the way that I'm evaluating the usefulness of the scientific method in determining truth is that I'm using the scientific method to determine whether the scientific method is reliable or not. So
you're not.
That's where my hang-up is.
There's another hang-up there, and that is that science doesn't proclaim to be stating what the truth is. Science is merely giving the best explanations that we currently have, which are all subject to revision. It's all tentative. So science isn't making proclamation about truth, which is ironic, because as far as I can tell, there's nothing that's going to get you closer to truth than science. But the methods that you're using, to me, would we at least agree, Austin, that truth is that which demonstrably comports with reality?
I would agree. I would say that there are values to truth, or there are ways of looking at truth in like, why does truth matter, and that ties into that. I don't really in saying that.
Sorry, I don't really see that. I've been asked this question: why does truth matter? I've been asked this question several times in the last few weeks on this show, and it's a question that confuses me, because I can't imagine anybody who could make a case for that truth doesn't matter. Now, what we could say is that we don't have access to truth. We don't have pure access to capital T truth. We don't have a way to demonstrate pure T truth. But what I was asking is, if you have something that is more reliable, more consistently reliable than science, what is it, and how did you determine that it's more reliable?
Okay, so the model of determining truth that I personally subscribe to, and that I find is most effective in my life, is that basically if you took a consensus on any particular topic and you included the largest possible sample size of opinions on that matter, that inevitable point that you would get to would be the capital T truth that we're all looking for.
Except,
so, if a Buddhist monk is sensing some kind of like oneness for everyone, then that is a part of a larger truth.
So the problem, Austin, is that we know and can demonstrate that your method is flawed, because at some point in history, the consensus
But aren't
was,
you using the scientific method to demonstrate that?
if I'd finished my sentence, I'd be able to point this out to you. At some point, the consensus view of everyone on the planet was wrong about something, correct?
I could conceive of that, yeah.
You don't have to conceive of it. Was it the consensus view at some point that the sun orbited the Earth?
I mean, the majority opinion. I'm talking like every single
Hang on.
mind in existence.
Austin,
Okay.
Austin, you proposed something that used the word consensus. And now when I ask you about it, you're talking about majority opinion. How are those? All I'm saying is, haven't most people believed, hasn't it been the case that the consensus opinion of people has been wrong at many points throughout history? Not conceptually, but demonstrably, like about the movement of planetary bodies, about where disease comes from, about, mental health issues. All of these things, the consensus view has been wrong about, right?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Okay. So how is that better than scientific methods if the method that you're proposing is one where we know it can be wrong? And really all you're saying is, I'm going to take everybody's opinion into account and go with the wisdom of the crowd. Now, I agree that we've demonstrated the wisdom of the crowd for, like, here's a jar full of gumballs. Have everybody guess how many are in there. You average it out, you will get shockingly close, because that's about how reasonable we are towards position. But the madness of crowd doesn't work when we're talking about, is there a God? Doesn't work when we talk about, how does DNA work? Doesn't work when we talk about the movement of celestial bodies. And so the method that you're proposing is already demonstrably inferior. As a matter of fact, scientific methods specifically seek to avoid the pitfalls that you're proposing by not making it about opinion, by not making it about people, and instead appealing to the facts.
And what about those? And Austin, real quick, Austin. And what about those issues where there is not a common sense consensus? Like, for example, the tensile strength of steel. There is a true answer to it under certain conditions. You can, do a Family Feud style method of polling, 100 people were surveyed, top 10 answers on the board, and ask them what the tensile strength of steel is. Unless you've got engineers in there, the numbers are going to be wildly off. Why would you rely upon that as opposed to the scientific method, which has resulted in an actual measurement for that fact?
So let me go back to the example that I gave of, like, this Buddhist monk meditating and feeling this unifying force that connects all thinking minds and all peoples. That monk is sensing something. There is some aspect of the universe that he's pursuing.
Okay, I muted Austin so that we don't try to talk over each other. I want you to give your example, Austin. The problem is, I don't think, I'll let you give your example, but I don't think that you are addressing this issue straightforward, because we just explained how what you're proposing is not only inferior to science, but science has specifically worked to remove that inferiority and unreliability from it. And now you just go back to, here's a Buddhist monk as a hypothetical. I'm going to let you finish it, but I don't see what your Buddhist monk hypothetical gets us, because what I asked was about a methodology and you're going to an anecdote. So go ahead, but recognize that you're not talking about a methodology. You're just saying, here's what somebody thinks. So go ahead.
So I appreciate you letting me kind of work this out. And it's entirely possible. It's definitely true that I still have to think about this more and crystallize it. But basically what I'm saying, the example that your co-host gave of Family Feud, there would be engineers in there because there are engineers that have conceptualized this. And I'm not saying the scientific method isn't part of this wider perception of capital T truth. But what I am saying is that you can't exclude methods that don't directly correlate to the scientific method. There are biases within the scientific method. There are the people that are using the scientific method are fallible humans. So disregarding the Buddhist monk.
Sorry, I've muted you again because you didn't get to the Buddhist monk, but I want to make sure this is clear. You've now gone from suggesting that you have a method that's better than science to saying there's a method that includes science plus this other stuff, and that we can't exclude that other stuff. Yes, as a matter of fact, we can and exclude bias, opinion. The fact that there will be engineers included in the consensus is false, because it could be that the consensus opinion of uninformed people, of which there will be many more of, is different from the consensus of informed experts, of which there will be fewer. And so this is the antithesis of what you're advocating. Whereas the best consensus should be a consensus of the experts, not of the population, because everybody in the population who's not an expert becomes essentially an outlier opinion, an uninformed guess. But what is this Buddhist monk going to tell us?
Yeah.
So it's hard to get my thoughts in order live on air. So I'll definitely call back in the future. But basically, the thing that I'm trying to advocate for is, yes, the scientific method has its purposes and can describe aspects of the truth more reliable than other methods. But there are things that it leaves out because of its biases, because of
like what?
The
like what
it has on it.
Like what? What does science leave out? Because I think we're about to get to the crux of this, because you just admitted that science does this better than other methods. You have not proposed anything that is even close to an actual method, but now you want to knock science for leaving stuff out. So name one thing, just one thing, that science leaves out.
So this relates into the value of truth that I was talking about. So if we were to use the scientific method to say, the example that my friend gave me was, there's an indigenous tribe in the jungle, and they can perceive things about their environment that somebody using the scientific method wouldn't be able to do, because they have a relationship with the spirits of the jungle. And you can demonstrate their ability to predict these things better using the scientific method.
Hang on, Austin. You just said that the scientific method is better at evaluating their claims.
Right, but it can't demonstrate how they go about what. There's no observable material force that they're interacting with that you could sense with
Austin
the method. That doesn't make it not true.
Austin, you have not demonstrated that there's any real phenomenon here. You've simply said there are people, indigenous people, who have premonitions from the spirits, and science doesn't get to say that that's true or false. Well, congrats, but prove that they're actually getting premonitions and that there's some phenomenon here to explain, because science isn't biased against demonstrating an actual phenomenon. Science is just barred from saying the source of this phenomenon is supernatural. If in fact indigenous people, through whatever means, premonition, tea leaf reading, pulling it out of their butt, were managed to come up with reliable, accurate predictions, then we would acknowledge these people are able to produce reliable, accurate predictions, and we don't know how. But what is the methodology that you are proposing? You've criticized science, saying science has a bias that doesn't account for something. But the example that you gave is something you cannot demonstrate is real. So the time to believe that is after you've demonstrated it's real.
Austin, it sounds like you're speaking in generalities and hypotheticals, a lot of ifs. If there was a group, that this indigenous group that had this closeness to nature, that the spirits and what have you, I think you need to get down to brass tacks and give us a very specific example of a group of people who can do something that no one else, that scientists cannot explain, and then show how you know or how you believe that this is a supernatural process. Because I think you're
there's
Go ahead.
okay. There's this simplex duplex phone thing is always a nightmare. So there is a study that my friend showed me. It is peer reviewed, and I'll look up the name of it and call you guys back next week. If you want, I can give you the brief top-down view of
It's what we've been asking for ages. So yeah, what is the study about? What does its purport to show?
So it's a study of mortality in different groups that are going into these South American jungles, and who comes out, who doesn't. The indigenous peoples
Austin,
and in this environment
Austin,
and communicating with
Austin,
yeah.
Your sentence made no sense. You said it was a study about mortality rates in South America and who comes out. That sentence does not present a cogent thought.
The South American jungles, like indigenous people that live there, their mortality rates versus people, scientists, researchers, and their mortality rates. There's a demonstrable difference between those, and I believe that this relationship with these jungle spirits is why.
Okay, why do you think that the cause is jungle spirits? Do you have any evidence or any way to demonstrate that jungle spirits exist, that they can in fact interact with reality, that they do in fact interact with reality, and that they in fact are the most likely proximate cause of the mortality rates of these indigenous people? What is the justification for any of that?
Oh, huh. Well, that just clicked something in my head because I was using a fallacy. I couldn't think of another way that they would be able to survive in their environment. So therefore, X must be true.
Okay, problem solved.
Into this show. Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Yep.
Thanks, Austin.
Thanks.
I appreciate you helping me think through this.
No worries. Catch you later. Glad it was helpful.
I was thinking that this was taken down the tack of a kind of an Aristotelian way of looking at nature. Like, I have conceived of a method by which XYZ takes place, and it exists entirely in the mind, and it's logically consistent within itself, but there is absolutely no testing going on to see whether or not there is a reason to believe that any of this is a valid way of thinking. And that's where this Buddhist monk sitting somewhere cooking up ways was it spiritism and
Spiritualism and
well, there's spiritism too. It's
there's
really big in
animism,
Brazil.
which is the religious notion of spirits that live, around us and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that Austin got to a spot where he's like, well, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, it's frustrating because first of all, we have a report that some indigenous people have a lower mortality rate in some factor. Now, if somebody came to me and said that it is in fact true that there's an indigenous group that has a lower mortality rate or that has never had this disease or whatever else, verify that claim is true. But if we're going to move forward and we want to treat this as interesting, the question then becomes, what are the candidate explanations for that? This is true, by the way, universally. Here's a phenomenon, and then we say, what are the candidate explanations? And therefore, that we begin listing things that we know have or believe have some causal relationship between them, and then categorizing and evaluating which of them are more likely. And so if we say, hey, Matt got cancer, and then we say, why did Matt get cancer? Well, he used tobacco, or he inhaled too many carcinogens in general, or he lived near this thing, or this was what his diet was like, or God decided to give him cancer, or the spirits around him gave him cancer. Now, there's a list of candidate explanations. There's been no demonstration that God or spirits should be included, that they could be included, that they're part of any of this. And so the reasonable method is to eliminate them from the the list because there's no reason to think they're true. Evaluate of the rest of the candidate explanations which one bears the most likely causal connection.
You know, if you want to backstop before you get to spirits, just say the microbiome. It's the microbiome that's responsible for these people's longevity in harsh jungle environments.
Oh, and I love that. I love that
Yeah.
in part because also if you think about microbiome, every single one of us, yes, all of you out there listening to me, you have creepy crawlies all over you all of the time. There are little things that you are a walking planet of food, and there's living things all over you, and they're crawling. I'm sorry, I'm probably really disturbing somebody, but it's true. And yet we don't think about those. The germ theory of disease, recognizing that there are things that we can't see with the naked eye, which are contributing to disease, is important and significant, not just because we have identified a model for disease, but that we recognize that there's a difference between being able to see something with a naked eye and whether or not it is an actual entity in reality. We know that's true for viruses.
It's a little insulting too. Like the people living in the jungle, right, in these South American locations, they have lived there for tens of thousands of years. They know what plants are dangerous to be around, what animals are dangerous to be around. They know what healing properties exist in certain plants. They've developed a culture of finding where they get their nutrients. And yet, rather than assuming that humans are just intelligent and they know how to keep themselves alive, you go to goblins that exist on the spirit realm that keep them alive and not foreign interlopers. I don't know. It's that's a little colonialistic in its thinking. I don't think it's intentionally so, but
Possibly.